We're going to see a lot of really fun stuff this week. Before we even get started on any of it, I want to give you the big picture. That way, when we get into each of these little techniques, you'll have a good idea of not only why it's useful, but how it fits into the overall scheme of writing interesting programs. Maybe the most exciting thing we're going to do this week is talk to the keyboard. So let's use that and write a game. Let's write a really simple little game. And here's the game. There's nothing to it. This little doodle is the entire design spec. You have control over this circle. It's in the top of the screen, and this circle is moving left to right. There are two big rectangles at the bottom and a hole between them. Your goal is to hit the space bar when the circle is positioned right over the hole. As soon as you hit the space bar, the circle drops, and if you get it in the hole, you get big points. And that's the whole game, nothing to it. Before we even start programming, I thought I'd pick out some colors, so I went to my favorite color picker and I picked out a background color and colors for the ball and for the rectangles. So let's start writing this program. In this video, though, I am not going to go into detail. In fact, I'm hardly even going to talk about these new ideas. I'll mention them as they come up so that you have an idea, and I'll say, oh, hey, we're about to do this kind of thing. But then I'm not going to explain how, because that's what this week's videos are all about. So the detailed videos this week will give you all the information you need to be a master of each one of these topics. So when we're done, you'll be able to come back to this video and it will all be like old familiar friends and you'll say, yeah. But now, when you see it all for the first time, it may be totally mysterious. Don't let that bug you. Just let it kind of wash over you. Get the general idea. Oh, you can do this kind of thing. And exactly how you type it, exactly where the parentheses go, maybe exactly what gets subtracted from what. Don't worry about that, because we'll cover all that in detail. Right now, it's just about getting the big picture and how the pieces hang together. So let's write a game. Here's an empty sketch, and the first thing I'm going to do is, as always, call Setup, and inside I'll create a graphics window. I'm going to make this one wide and short. If that doesn't work out right, I can always change it. And we'll call Smooth, and then I'll have a draw, and we'll just draw the background of a medium gray. And I know that's not much of a program, but I'm going to run it anyway. Success! I just want to make sure I don't have any typos. Now I'm going to change the background color. And I could type red, green, and blue values here, but I'm going to name a variable, which doesn't exist yet, called background color. And up top, I'm going to declare it. Just as integer and float variables can hold numbers, color variables can hold colors. So here's how we declare it. And I'm going to stick into it the color that I picked for my color picker, just sort of a light yellow. And let's see if that worked. Great. So now we have a running program with my new background color. Now let's draw the player character. And I know the player character is a circle. So let's go ahead and first we'll fill. And I'm going to name all the variables associated with the circle ball because it's short and easy to type. So first I'll fill with the ball color. And then I'm going to draw the circle at the ball X and Y. So tell you what, let's call them ball X and ball Y. That's the center of the ball. And then ball radius is the radius of the ball, but I know the ellipse needs the diameter. So we double it, and now it's declare these variables. So what should ball X and ball Y be? Well, let's just put them on the screen somewhere. So I'll put them at 100, 100, just so I can see the ball. And the ball radius will be, 30. If it's too big or too small, we'll change it. And I know what color I want the ball to be because I've already picked that. So just reading it off of my little scribbled note, that's the color I picked for the ball. Let's run this and see if we see the ball. Great. But we have a black outline around the ball, and I don't think I want that in this game. I just want the ball to look like it's sitting there, so I'm going to call no stroke. Let's run that. Beautiful. Okay, now let's draw the wall at the bottom. So first thing, I'm going to draw it before the ball. So we're going to draw the background, then the wall, then the ball. So the ball will be always visible because it's the last thing drawn. So first thing we'll do is we'll fill with the wall color. And then we're going to draw a couple of rectangles. But what goes into those rectangles? Well, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I'll show you how I find out. I draw myself a little picture like this one. The way I'm going to think about the wall is really in terms of the gap, because the gap is the interesting thing to me. I can move it around, I can make it wider and narrower to change how hard the game is, and the rectangles that make up the wall just kind of do the right thing to give me the gap I want. So I start with a variable that I'm going to create called gap width, and that's going to tell me the width of the gap. And I'm thinking if I make that very small, the game gets harder. If I make that big, the game gets easier. I know that the rectangle on the left is going to start at 0, and it's going to go until some other variable I'm going to create called gap left, which is the left edge of the hole. That's going to be the width of the first box. So let's make that box. So tell you what, I'll comment out the second call for now. And let's make a rectangle. Its left edge is 0. Its height, well, I don't have a definition for that yet. So let's call it wall height. Now, when we call size in any program, processing immediately takes the two numbers that are in size and assigns them to variables called width and height. And from then on, width and height have the numbers that are typed there in size. So this is just a really nice convenience. It means if we want to refer to the width and height of the graphics window, we don't have to constantly look back to size. And if we change the numbers in size, we don't have to change them everywhere. We just use the variables and they automatically have these values. So the height of the screen is height. And by subtracting wall height, that gives me the top of the wall. And I know I'm going through this quickly. Don't worry about it. If it's not making sense to you, we can always come back. We can look at the picture and we'll see examples of this throughout. What is the width of this thing? It's gap left. And the height, of course, is just wall height itself. So let's create the missing variables. I'll say that the wall height is, say, 100 units. The gap will begin at 100. And while we're at it, let's set the gap width to be, say, 100. And then for convenience, just so we don't have to keep typing it all the time, I'm going to say gap right is gap left plus gap width. Finally, I need the color for the wall. So we'll say wall color. And I already have this figured out. So let's run this and see if we get the right left-hand rectangle. Perfect. Okay, now let's draw the right-hand rectangle. To draw this, I go back to my picture and I say, how do I define the right-hand rectangle? Well, its left edge is at gap right and its right edge is at width. So I can use that information to draw the rectangle. So let's go down to the rectangle and I'll tell you what, I'm just going to copy and paste this line because I know all the Y information, the height stuff is all going to be the same. It's just the starting point that changes. So it starts at gap right. And I'm going to add some spaces here so that everything lines up so I can easily tell at a glance that these two things are the same. And the width of this thing is width minus gap right. And again, if that doesn't make immediate sense to you, don't worry about it. Just kind of let it wash over you for now. But if I run this, great, I get my hole. Now, the value of talking about the gap this way is I think I want to push the gap to the right. So I'm going to come up here to gap left, the starting left point of the gap, and let's make it much more. Let's make it 300. So I'm going to push the gap to the right. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's leave it there. We can always move it again later if we want. And maybe I should make it a little bit wider because I don't want the game to be too hard or too easy. All right, and if we want it to be narrower or thinner or wider later, we can always change it. Well, that's a good place to take a pause. In part 2, we'll make the ball move.